It was the winter of 1978 in a quiet rural town in Ohio, when the Mitchell family bought the old farmhouse that locals whispered about but never dared to go near. The property had been on sale for nearly 20 years, falling apart under the weight of time, its windows cracked, its wooden beams sagging, the paint peeling in long strips that revealed a skeletal frame beneath. The realtor, nervous but eager to finally be rid of it, offered it to the Mitchells at a price so low it felt like theft. For Thomas and Linda Mitchell, a young couple with 2 children, 8-year-old Claire and her younger brother Ryan, this house seemed like the perfect chance to start over, a new life away from the chaos of the city. The first time they stepped inside, the smell struck them. Damp wood mixed with something metallic, like rust or dried blood. The air was heavy, stale, as though no one had breathed inside those walls for decades. Linda brushed it off as mold, while Thomas told himself that old houses always had a smell. But Claire felt it immediately. She tugged on her mother's hand and whispered, "Mom, I don't like it. Someone's already here." That night, after the movers left, Thomas cracked open a bottle of cheap champagne to celebrate their new beginning. The kids ran from room to room, their voices echoing in the hollow structure, until they grew tired and collapsed on sleeping bags in the living room. There was laughter, there was warmth, but beneath it all was the silence of the house, too still, too watchful. The first sign came quickly. Around midnight, as the fire in the fireplace dwindled, Claire sat up suddenly. Her eyes were wide, locked on the darkened hallway. Ryan stirred next to her, confused, while Thomas and Linda were still half asleep. Claire pointed. "There's a man," she whispered. Thomas got up, heart racing, and grabbed the poker from the fireplace. He flicked on the hallway light. Empty, just faded wallpaper curling at the edges and dust hanging in the air. He scolded her gently, told her it was just a bad dream, and sent her back to bed. But Linda noticed how pale her daughter was, how her tiny hands trembled as she tried to close her eyes again. 2 nights later, Ryan started crying in his sleep. He screamed until Linda rushed into the room and shook him awake. His face was wet with tears, his voice hoarse. "He was talking to me," Ryan sobbed. "The man said I can't leave. He said this is his house." Thomas brushed it off again. Kids had nightmares, kids had imaginations. But deep down, even he was unsettled. Because he had been hearing something too. The creak of footsteps when no one was upstairs, the faint scrape of nails against wood. A week passed before they found the basement door. It had been painted shut, hidden behind an old wardrobe that the movers had shoved aside. Claire found it first, running her hand along the outline in the wall. "There's a door here," she said. It took Thomas nearly an hour to pry it open. Dust exploded into the air, making everyone cough. The wooden stairs groaned as he shined a flashlight downward, revealing stone walls dripping with moisture. Against one wall sat an old rocking chair, its wood blackened with age. And on the floor, half buried under dirt, was a set of iron shackles bolted into the stone. Linda froze. What the hell? Thomas tried to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat. Probably just old farm stuff. You know, they used to keep animals. "Those aren't for animals," Linda cut him off. That night, none of them slept. Claire refused to go near her bedroom. Ryan curled into his mother's side, trembling. Thomas stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing that slow rhythmic creak of the rocking chair, even though no one had touched it. Within days, things escalated. Objects moved on their own, silverware clattering across the kitchen floor, doors slamming shut even when windows were sealed. One evening, Linda found handprints smeared across the bathroom mirror, far too large to belong to anyone in the family. But it was Claire who suffered the most. She stopped eating, stopped playing. She sat in silence, staring at corners of the room where no one stood. One night, Linda heard her whispering. When she leaned closer, she realized her daughter was having a conversation, pausing as though listening, then replying in a hushed, frightened voice. "What are you saying, sweetie?" Linda asked. Claire's lips quivered. "He says you can't stop him." By now, even Thomas couldn't deny it. He reached out to a local priest, Father Donovan, who agreed to bless the house. When the priest stepped into the living room, his face drained of color. He muttered a prayer under his breath before sprinkling holy water. But as he did, a violent crash echoed from the basement. The rocking chair slammed against the wall on its own, splintering wood. The priest's voice shook as he declared, "This place is unholy. Whatever happened here, it is not finished." Terrified, the Mitchells begged him to stay, but Father Donovan refused. He left them with a single warning: do not go back into the basement. Of course, that night, the basement door opened on its own. Thomas nailed it shut, but in the morning, the nails lay scattered on the floor. The children began to change. Ryan started speaking in a voice too deep for his age, his eyes rolling back as he hissed words no one understood. Claire drew pictures obsessively, figures hanging from chains, dark shapes standing in corners, a tall man with hollow eyes. Linda couldn't take it anymore. She begged Thomas to leave, to pack up and go, but Thomas refused. We put everything we have into this house. We can't just run. 2 weeks later, everything unraveled. It was past midnight when Linda woke to the sound of screaming. She ran to Claire's room and froze. Her daughter's body was levitating above the bed, her limbs jerking violently, as if invisible hands pulled at her. Ryan stood in the corner, his face blank, his voice whispering, "He's here. He's here. He's here." Thomas rushed in and tried to grab Claire, but a force threw him across the room. His back slammed against the wall so hard he couldn't breathe. Linda screamed, praying, begging, until suddenly everything stopped. Claire dropped onto the bed, gasping, sobbing. Ryan collapsed to the floor. The next morning, Thomas called the realtor, demanding answers. At first, she refused, but eventually she broke down. The farmhouse had belonged to a man named Jacob Kessler, a reclusive farmer in the 1920s. Neighbors had long suspected he was keeping people captive, runaway workers, maybe even children, in his basement. When police finally raided the house, they found chains, bones, and journals filled with ramblings about sacrifices to keep his land fertile. Jacob was never caught. Some said he hung himself in the attic. Others claimed he disappeared into the woods. The house had remained untouched ever since. The Mitchells fled that night, leaving everything behind. They never went back. But the story didn't end there. Years later, in 1992, a group of college students broke into the abandoned farmhouse on a dare. They filmed their exploration on a bulky camcorder. The footage was never released to the public, but investigators who reviewed it said the last 30 seconds were unlike anything they had seen before. The students were laughing, joking, until they reached the basement. The camera showed the rocking chair moving on its own, slow and deliberate. Then, a tall shadow filled the frame. The students screamed, the camera fell, and the tape cut to static. None of those students were ever found. Today the farmhouse still stands, hidden behind overgrown weeds and rusted fencing. Locals swear that if you drive past on a quiet night, you can see lights flickering in the windows, hear the faint creak of a rocking chair, and sometimes if you listen closely, the voice of a child begging to be let out. The Mitchell family never spoke publicly about what happened, but Claire, now an adult, gave one interview to a small newspaper. Her voice trembled as she said only one thing: he never left that house, and he's still waiting.